And then to Black women, don't let nobody make you small, ever. Don't let anybody tell you what you're capable of. Whether your dream, your space for imagination is how you want to raise your children differently, or your space for imagination is the business that you want to create, go after it unapologetically because you deserve it.
Content warning. Triggering content discussions on gun violence and its impact are featured on this podcast.
The most neglected person in America is the Black woman.
The epidemic of gun violence is taking a toll on children.
For Black men ages 44 and younger, the leading cause of death is homicide.
I think that the unspoken assumption is that this can't happen to me.
Ask them every day, what are they going to do about gun violence?
Hey y'all, thank you for joining us. My name is Lynniah Grayson and I am the host of the Source Survivor podcast. We are currently in North Carolina at an amazing conference and I'm sitting here with my good sis, Eva Maria, and I'm so excited to learn from her today and to share her amazing work, her amazing approach with you all. Eva Maria Lewis is an award-winning human rights advocate on a mission to end what she calls the poverty-induced gun violence epidemic. She is a born and raised Southside Chicagoan, proud daughter of a single mother, writer and researcher championing disenfranchised communities. As founder and executive director of Free Root Operations, she works to empower Black women and mothers to unleash their power and to create change within themselves and their communities they live in. Eva Maria received her Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology from the University of Pennsylvania. So thank you, Eva, for being here with me today.
Hey.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about you, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we were able to connect yesterday.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we'll tell people about how that happened in a second, I guess. But yes, as Lynniah said, my name is Eva Maria. I am a founder of a nonprofit in Chicago, Free Root Operation. I just care about my people. I'm from the South Side Chicago. I was raised by a Black single mother. And I believe that so much more is possible for us. I believe that it takes us getting access to
You gave. It was the most powerful presentation that I've seen while at this conference.
Thank you.
Definitely, absolutely. We could just feel the passion, the drive, just your whole entire mission and your efforts and how you combine not just an executive director of a nonprofit organization, but research, and then you even pushed your own research, right? And so it was phenomenal, and then your partnership with Johns Hopkins as well. So please tell me a little bit more about your nonprofit and your role as an ED.
Yes, thank you. Just to give the audience a little bit of context, so we are at the SABRE conference. This is not sponsored by SABRE, y'all. But this is how we connected. And so Lynniah came to my session, which was on community violence, and I was able to present on the research that we have been collecting. So this is a research effort that I initially led and was able to receive support and funding from Bloomberg Health Initiative through a partnership with Johns Hopkins University Center for Gun Violence Solutions Center, which is incredible. And so the research that I presented on was our Bloom program, which is an innovative solution to the poverty-induced gun violence epidemic. I'll tell y'all what that is in a second. But focusing on women, focusing on Black moms, because how can we expect to see a change in the next generation of young people who are often accused of perpetuating firearm homicide, but their parents are disempowered? And so we often, I guess because of the way that society does not value Black women, we skip that and we go straight to the young people. And while the young people are important and we do need these solutions that are oriented around youth violence and empowerment, we also need to make sure that we're pouring into us, that we're feeling loved and cared for and empowered. Everyone talks about the exodus that happened during the war on drugs when we were left by ourselves as mothers to take care of these kids. But we see the gap, you know, we saw the exodus, but we didn't feel it.
Right.
We condemned. And that's why you hear all this talk about baby mama this and black women that, and all we do is pile on black women instead of saying, are you good? What do you need right now? And maybe, perhaps, if we did invest in these people, then we'd see a change in our communities. And that's why at Free River Operation, we do call black women sites of social possibility, because it's untapped power right there. And so that's what I was presenting on our innovative approach with the Bloom program, pouring into these women. No need to get into all the details right now. Y'all can go to the site freeoperation.com and see a little bit more about the program. But the point of this conversation is to just shed awareness and shed light on the fact that programs like that do exist, work like this does exist, people like us who are constituents of the things that we fight every day.
Absolutely.
Those programs exist, we exist, and we are the experts here because these are our experiences.
Just to confirm, it was a 6-month project, right? Or a 6-month cohort?
Yes, so we've done 2 cohorts so far. We did 6 months working with 8 women in 2022. We did another 6 months in 2023 working with a starter population of 15 women. And so these women, they get 60 hours of in-person support. They get 10 hours of counseling through our program. We take them to Broadway shows. We take them to nature retreats. We expose them to leisure and luxury. Leisure is a human right on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so it was actually the community, through a community needs and assets assessment, that revealed that they valued leisure as much as they did safety and economic development, which was surprising.
Wow.
And so it was up to us as people that are listening to community and that are also a part of community to encapsulate what they're saying and put it into real
Create those
action.
opportunities.
Exactly. And so that's the only reason, honestly, that we started to include leisure as a component of Bloom, more so than just the wraparound services that you see every day. And so the cohort is also oriented around a curriculum that I've worked closely with some staff, and then also just thinking about my own experiences and thinking about my experience being raised by a Black single mom to make. And so our pillars are self-love, nourishment, and transformation. You will not find our definitions in Merriam-Webster. We made our own, and we cite other incredible Black women in those definitions, like Bell Hooks and Miriam Kaba, who talks about hope being a discipline. And so we just teach these women to love themselves, to love their community, to have agency, and then to see the correlation between their individual wellness and their communal wellness, because that's how you stop littering, for example, and pick things up and want to create a landscape that's going to make you feel good, and it will be a reflection of an area that is well loved and poured into.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So much wisdom, so much experience. I'm wondering if you can paint a picture for us of what it is like to live in Chicago, but not just for yourself, but for these mothers, as you shared testimonials about what they learned, where they were in their seasons, in their lives, and along their journey. Some of them had lost children, brothers. Some of them were hearing gunshots daily. Just tell me a little bit about what that's like and the impact that that has on Black women.
Right. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I was raised in South Shore, and I was also raised between the Woodline area as well. Both of those areas are being heavily gentrified right now. Everyone knows about the Obama Presidential Library that's being built on the south side of Chicago. The library is in proximity to both of those neighborhoods. We are east side neighborhoods. And also the University of Chicago is smack dab in the middle of Woodline and is pretty much taking over right now. But those are the geographies that raised me and poured into me by way of my grandparents coming through on the second wave of the Great Migration from Mississippi and Alabama. And so my experience as a South Sider is hearing gunshots every day, every single day, every day, and it being normal. And also,
For how long? When you say every day over 20 years, over 10 years, over 5 years.
I don't think, so I was an imaginative child. I was also an only child. And I used to imagine the gunshots that I was hearing.
Fireworks.
You know, not even actually. I didn't think they were fireworks. I thought it was someone closing a dumpster really hard. I know, right? Like, you know, the dumpsters in the alley, you take your garbage. I thought it was somebody just slamming them really hard, and I'd be like, dang, they're really slamming that dumpster. They're slamming it repeatedly, to the point that even now, I don't jerk when I hear gunshots, because even though I know what it is now, little me sought comfort by just imagining what it was. But then to get older and to be told, you talked about the landscape of Chicago, backstory really quick. And this also relates to why I started calling our epidemic poverty-induced gun violence. But Chicago was a very segregated city. At one point in time, they were saying it's the most segregated city in the United States, because you can ride a train line from the south side of Chicago to the north side of Chicago and see the races on the cart change at a certain point once you pass downtown.
Wow.
And so growing up, I consider myself now to have been a refugee from my community, because I've always had to acquire an education starting in kindergarten outside of my immediate community. And so I was the first in my family to get into gifted centers. I don't know if they have those in Seattle. I don't know if they called them the same things, but I started gifted in kindergarten, proceeded to get into, the highest marks that you can get in Chicago public schools, until I eventually landed in the #1 high school in the state, which was also a public school, but it was like a public-private school. And that school was very far from my community. It was on the north side of Chicago, and so I woke up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning just to go to school. All of high school, 5 o'clock in the morning every day, not even being able to go to sleep because you got so much homework, and I'm Black, so I have to work 3 times as hard. I'm going to sleep between 11 and midnight, so I'm getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep every day during my formative years. So that's frustrating. And then to also not have a parent that's like an engineer or a scientist like some of my other classmates, so no one's really able to help me with my homework because it's so advanced.
Right.
And so because my school was so far and I was having this experience, I was traveling on the CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. Sorry, I'm using colloquial city language.
Okay.
But I'm taking the bus, I'm taking the train every day, and I'm seeing the population change, and I'm seeing the resources change. I'm seeing how my neighborhood didn't have a grocery store for nearly a decade, but the neighborhood where my school was at had grocery stores and restaurants and gardens and parks and leisure activities, everything galore. You can tick all of the boxes on that Universal Declaration of Human Rights and see those needs being met in these neighborhoods that were majority white people.
Right.
And then my neighborhood, the needs were not being met at all. And so finally, in going to high school in a completely different geography, I saw the differences, and it made me angry.
Absolutely.
It made me upset, and also just like being compared against people that had so much more in terms of
Privilege and
resources, and
opportunities.
even like 2 parents, and just having more. My mom was struggling. I'm leaving school and I'm embarrassed because she's bringing me to the food pantry on my half days. We have to go to the north side to get the good food from the food pantry instead of actually going on the south side. And it all connected to me, and I saw it so clearly one day. I remember being like 16 years old. And I got a chance to study abroad. I went to France for a month. That was a big thing too. And I came back and I was like, what the heck? Could you imagine like you're in Europe, you having your Southern France experience, you on the Mediterranean Sea, you getting all things. Somebody's telling me that's an eggplant. I'm like, I never even seen an eggplant, so I'm learning about foods because I lived in a food desert. And y'all dropped me right back in the hood. What? And that's where it started for me. And so I started to see the differences. I'm like, my community, they always talk about, oh, they're shooting, or my classmates didn't want to come south. They didn't want to come to where I lived, or I was too embarrassed to have them come over maybe. And then saying, but there's other commonalities too in our communities, right? Like we don't have money. And thinking about narratives from people in my family that I'm not going to share publicly, but just knowing like, I know why y'all are making some of these decisions that you're making. It's not just guns, it's gangs. It's not just gangs, it's drugs. But why would we sell drugs,
Right.
Why do we need to do that stuff? And so that's why I started to call the epidemic that we're going through poverty-induced gun violence epidemic. I had to find a word, and I did that at 20 after 4 years of thinking critically. Only at 20 years old did I start saying that, because I was like, you know what? The gun violence that they're talking about with these mass shootings in these schools, it's important, but that's not what we're going through. We're going through something different, and it's going to take something different to solve it in our communities.
So how do you see that term being used nationally?
Nationally? Oh, I see it.
Me too.
I see it.
I'm like, we
I
gotta
think-
make sure that we are giving you credit for using this.
I appreciate
It's
that.
so profound, but tell me a little bit about
Yes,
that. What
cite
is your
black
vision?
women. Cite black women.
Please.
Yes, cite black women. But I see it on the national agenda. I see it discussed as a separate issue because it is. And I think that a lot of these national organizations and these national calls to actions are exploiting Black grief. I think they are exploiting our grief, they are exploiting our plight in order to fulfill their needs. And the second that gun control does not stop the poverty-induced gun violence epidemic in our communities, they're going to look confused. Even though they know deep down it's not going to do it for us. We can look at neighborhoods all over the world.
Wait a minute, because that really struck me in a different kind of way, just thinking about what you just said.
It's not going to do it.
How do you build on this poverty-induced gun violence? And in addition to what you're doing with Bloom, focus on research that defines and highlights and measures the poverty-induced gun violence.
How do we expand on it? One, it needs to have its own seat on the national agenda, which means that it needs to have its own call to actions. It needs to have its own funding pot. So I did this thing, and I won't name organizations because I don't want to burn bridges. I think the work everyone's doing is important, right? Like people, no one should die. You know, nobody should be dying. But I'm thinking about us. I'm thinking about us, and I have to think about us selflessly because we are important.
Absolutely.
We are important. And I did this workshop with some of the people in my program, and I broke down mission statements from some of the organizations that are dominating the gun violence prevention and gun control space. And every one of these organizations had us as a subset, and we're not seeing that.
Always.
We're not seeing it though. And it's so visual. I had to break it down on slides. Look, we are not in the mission. We are a campaign or an initiative or a pathway or, I saw one organization, will not say a name, but they done listed every single ism in the world. They said we fight against it. How? That don't make sense.
Right.
We have to have enough self-worth as a community to stand up and say, no, we are the problem.
Right.
We are not a sub-issue. This is the issue. This is the pressing issue. And poverty-induced gun violence, addressing that epidemic, is going to be the biggest save for our communities, not just in this nation, but globally, because this is a diasporic issue as well. And so in thinking about research, in my presentation yesterday, you heard it, people were asking me how I did this and how I did that, and I had to say, listen, perhaps I have a teammate, and she'll say, Eva, you are brilliant, you are a genius. I'm like, okay, sure. I said, maybe I am brilliant, but my community is brilliant. If I am brilliant, it's because my community is brilliant.
100%.
And we know everything we need. We know everything we need, to the point that when I talked about that leisure thing, people ask, how did you do a CNAA talking to 500 people? I set up a network situation. It was a whole scaffold. We got volunteers. It was tally marks. We went to the bus stops. What do you need? What do you want your community to look like? That was it. 2 questions. Open the doors, the floodgates, because we know what we need. And we are smarter than we give ourselves credit for. And we also are capable of doing the research that we are relying on other people who are affiliated with ivory towers to do. We do not need that middle step. We can do it ourselves. And sure, the legitimacy is important. The resources are important, and those relationships are important. But we can also start now. If we start now, then we can bring it to them and say, hey, fund it further. And that's exactly what happened that got me here.
And that's a perfect response to segue into this next question. Why is research important in general, and why is it important for Black and brown people?
Why is research important in general? We need to know things. I think it's simple, right? I feel like our people have been researching before we were taken. We had to learn how to take care of our hair. And now we have all these different styles, and that took research. Okay, so now I know in the cold seasons I need to do this, and in the warm seasons I need to do that. And then our people were enslaved, and so then they said, okay, it's cold, I need to put in some braids. I need to do cornrows now. Or we researched and we figured out how to create maps in cornrows. Research is everywhere. It's just a matter of wanting to know and seeking answers. That's all it is. And so when it comes to the problems that we deal with as a community, It's just a matter of taking that communal wisdom and that ancestral wisdom and knowledge and those ways of assessing and knowing and sussing out. Black people are good for sussing something out, right? So it's just a matter of sussing out on a different scale and being like, okay, now I can get to a root. I can get to a root problem here. And Black and brown people, we need to research because only we know how to tell stories. Only we know how to portray our lived experiences because other people can only take a stab. They can only take a guess.
I'm wondering, do you share your research that you developed, that you've worked on tirelessly? Do you share that research with your participants, your families? Mm-hmm. And so what is their response?
So interestingly, the second cohort, they were really into what was happening. And so the first day of the cohort, I told them that we wanted to collect research, and they signed an agreement that said, okay, you know, they release information, I know it'll be anonymous. They were like, cool. But then they were like, okay, wait, but we want to know more. What are you going to do with this? And so they know my story, and they know that I'm a constituent of the work as well. And so when I was breaking down to them how it could be used, then also we'd had research from the previous cohort, and so we'd shown them this mini documentary with some stats. And so I remember distinctly at orientation somebody making a connection and saying, oh, so the information that you're collecting on these surveys is going to result in that from the video? And we were like, yeah, and they were like, that's cool, because they'd never seen that before. They, you know, you go to these clinics or these social service agencies and they just give you something, and maybe it's an assessment, and they never get to see what it results in. And so for them to see the results, they were like, yeah, I'm invested. And it also made them even more excited to participate in the program because the research from the previous cohort showed them what they could expect to achieve over the course of the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. And so we looped them in, not just in the results, but we looped them in the process as well. And so a part of the research project that we did was oral histories. And so we were on the way to a nature retreat. And I remember these women had already said they'd do the oral histories after receiving an email with a big description. But on the way to the nature retreat, I had a half an hour. It was a little bit of a drive. It was like 3 hours. I had 20 minutes to half an hour conversation with each woman to just talk to them about the partnership. And they knew this isn't public information. It hasn't come out yet. But I was like, this is what we're trying to do. And they were like, can I use the oral histories too? We were like, yeah, let's do it. And so that's why in the presentation, we talked about ways that we're looping the woman in to agentically be able to also use the data for their own efforts and for their own agendas as well.
Wow.
So there's ways that you can loop people in. It doesn't have to you don't have to break things down to people like they're babies. You just have to be patient and also connected to the big picture.
I'm excited to see more like content and videos and, like you said, documentaries and stuff too. Have you already done that? Will you be working on that anytime soon?
Documentaries and stuff? I would like to.
Testimonial videos and stuff like
Oh yeah,
that?
we do testimonial videos. Okay. We definitely do. Definitely not as robust as the oral histories, just because there was a methodology to creating those questions and the ways that the questions were asked, and also the rapport that they had with the people that were asking them. But I would say, yes, I think this is one project, but I see research being a component of the work forever. I think there was an intentional choice behind including communal wisdom and also hood research is what we call it at Fro. Hood research. It was a choice.
Tell me about that term.
Well,
hood research.
We're doing research in the hood. I don't know.
Right.
We're not a university, but I have my degree in sociology from an Ivy League university, and I feel like that was enough to get the needle pushing. I feel like people wait sometimes. I'm not saying I'm not gonna get a master's. I'm not saying it won't be doctor one day. I don't know. Who knows? I have no clue. It's wherever God wants for me. But you don't have to wait to start assessing. And I'm thinking of another connection too with archives. I feel like our people, we collect photos, we collect papers. There's an archive in Chicago. It's the Vivian G. Harsh Archives. It's in a library, and she's credited for being one of the first Black librarians in the Chicago Public Library system. And she took it upon herself to start collecting everything. And she started during the Black Renaissance period in Chicago. She's got, the only reason that we are now finding out about some dope people that have existed, I'm talking like, was released from slavery in Missouri, 1860s, and found their way to Chicago and built a working girls' home. That's Melissa Elam. We would not know about that woman. No one knows about that woman. Only reason we know about that woman is because in this program that we're doing with some of the moms we work with, we've got them doing archival research to rediscover Black women in the same way that Alice Walker rediscovers Zora Neale Hurston, because we are each other's keeper. But that's research, keeping those records, uncovering each other. It's deeper than science. It's not just about social science and these conferences. It is about our history because they swept it under the rug.
Yeah.
Like the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, they are going to, the Equal Justice Initiative is the organization that's over the Legacy Museum. They're going to sites where our people were lynched all over the South and collecting soil. And they have an entire wall. Yes, it's crazy. If you go, bring some tissues. I was boo-hooing. But they have an entire wall of jars and with the soil in the location where the person was lynched in the year. And they've got this monument, this memorial, National Memorial for Peace and Justice, with all of the lynchings that they have been able to find so far per county in the South, including where we're standing right now in North Carolina. It's not just about solving problems, it's about reconciling with history, because when we reconcile with history, what happens? You tell me, Lynniah. What happens when we reconcile with history as Black people? I would love to know.
We'll see a shift.
Exactly.
We'll see a tremendous shift.
Because how can you see a change if you don't even know where you come from?
Absolutely.
Grandmas who be hoarding papers and obituaries and programs from these little events, they're researchers. They are researchers.
Absolutely. I'm wondering too, like, we have this in common, investing in Black women.
Yeah.
I don't hear many people communicate this message that I heard you communicate that's so similar to my message. And it's if the mothers are well, the children are well.
Have to be.
But if the children are sick and they're not well, if the mothers are not well, vice versa. How do I say that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to be okay.
It's common sense, and that's why.
It's common sense.
That's why I said the
But why does
thing.
society not look at it like it's common sense? I'm like, this is not rocket
I
science.
think we'd first have to decide who's society. Because we knew. I didn't have to read a paper to know that.
Right.
That was common sense.
Right.
I was raised by a Black single mom.
Right.
My mom also graduated from the first Bloom cohort. I didn't tell them, the people that, but it was made in her image.
Oh.
I want to know too, though, like what you think about that.
About what?
Because you said the work that you're doing is around survivors,
Right,
of children, and I looked into it. I did my research. Children, the mothers, everybody who has survived and also lost somebody, or survived the grief and the loss. So you're saying that you don't see people say what we're saying, which is the moment of how can you have a well child if a parent isn't well?
Right.
Why do you think that people don't say that? And also, in the places that you've gone, because I know you were at the White House, you've been advocating, doing the thing for our people. What has it looked like for you to constantly reassert that? Because I'm sure you've had to bring it into the space.
Absolutely. It's just challenging. It's like people ignore you. They look at you, they look right through you or around you. They hear you, but it goes through one ear and it comes out the other. Maybe even they're advocating for different areas, different focus points of gun violence. Maybe they're doing boots on the ground work, interventions and prevention efforts. Maybe they are doing policy, like you said, around the, lobbying and, different bills and legislative work, right? But when it comes to us, like you said, it's like a subset. You know what I mean?
I think it's erasure.
Yeah.
And I think erasure comes to mind because erasing something feels deliberate. Like, to ignore something is to kind of just turn back, but even just literally thinking about a pencil, right? You write something, you erase it, you had to do that. And I feel like that's what's often happening. And I see a lot of people talk about how Black men are the most impacted by gun violence. That is true. That is statistically true.
But what does that mean? If Black men are the most impacted by gun violence, then that means that there's always a Black woman that's left to carry the burden.
Always. It has to be.
It goes
because they
hand
came
in
from
hand.
a Black woman.
Exactly. So whether that's grandmama, auntie,
somebody is
wife,
grieving.
mama, daughter.
Somebody's left behind to pick up the pieces.
Yes.
Every time.
Right.
But this is the other thing. So
Right.
I'm looking at the same graph that everyone's citing. This is in the workshop I just told you I led. I was like, I've been thinking. I'm looking at the same graph. I'm like, having to zoom in some. Because there's another part of that graph that's about women. We are dying by gun violence more than any other woman.
We are. That's true.
I don't hear anyone say that. They'll take the same graph, talk about the men, ignore the women. There has to be a way for us to reconcile the way that our men are being killed,
But
and also honor what's happening to us.
Absolutely. What you just said made me think about, they'll talk about the men, they won't talk about the black women, but they also won't talk about the children of these black men. And that's one of my things that's like, how are you working with this individual who was 22 years old, having a tough time in the streets, going through whatever he's going through, whether he's in the streets or not, whether he's in the streets or in college. He has a child, he has a wife, he's murdered, and then what happens to the wife and the child? There's no supports at all for them. And that just doesn't make sense to me. But there's millions and billions of dollars being funneled through our communities to combat gun violence. But we're not seeing the dollars.
At all. We're not seeing them.
And so I was...
And that some of it, because I just submitted a grant. Some of it's because these grants are asking for evidence-informed statements. But the evidence is subjective. They don't want objective evidence, and communal wisdom doesn't count towards that. They want academically cited, but what happens when the researchers are not responsible for capturing our experiences or working with partners in a way that isn't exploitative?
Right.
And so then the proof that we need the support for the women, we need the support for the kids, it doesn't exist. And the burden falls on us who are disproportionately left without access to education and economic resources to develop these studies and develop ways. So like, we have to do the double work of affecting the work, building the program, and also proving that what we're doing is righteous. And I know you can empathize with that.
A couple more questions come to mind as we prepare to wrap up. But you know how there's that whole thing, reciprocity is huge, right? Before, I want to say society, but I hesitate because you said who's society, and it made me think about that. But in terms of just like, what's in it for me? So if we had to think about society and that question of what's in it for me, why invest in black women? How would you respond to that? Why should society invest in black women?
Because they rely on us. I think about the archetypes, the mammy. White society relied on black women to raise children, to take care of children.
Come on.
And then those children beat on the mammy. I think about the sapphire. White society has relied on black women to be angry, so they have a finger to point at. White women have relied on black women to be angry and masculinized, so that their femininity could stand out more. Society relies on black women being the mule of the world because they ride on our backs. But then you think, if you rely on something, shouldn't you invest in them to keep them going? And I feel like these archetypes that I've mentioned have been used to divest, to say, oh, unworthy, unlikable, unattractive, lack, L-A-C-K, lack everything, lack of everything. We are nothing, right? But the flip side is the function. There's always been a societal function to the message that they have pushed out to make it seem as though we weren't unworthy. The truth has been in front of us all along. We are the backbone.
The thing I want you to also consider is imagine a world where there's all these healed, powerful, brilliant black women. We then become a threat. We're already a threat.
Already, oh, we're the most educated now.
Girl.
They're mad. They
So
took affirmative
imagine-
action because they were mad.
I know. So imagine what it would look like, right? If who we're working with and who we're supporting in those 2,000 interest applications you received.
Thank you for putting me on. We did receive 2,000 applications.
So imagine if all these black women are uplifted and empowered and healed. What would our world look like?
Better. I have to cite Combahee River Collective, and they said we'll all be free when black women are free. I have to, because it's true. It's like, I always say this: white people don't know that they are disadvantaged by white supremacy. They don't realize the impact it has on their mental health, the expectations that it puts on them, the burden. I mean, keeping up with unethical power, that does something to your soul. You see the mental health epidemic rising, and it's not racial. I mean, everybody is messed up right now. Imagine what would happen if you took out the harm that we all know that we're complicit in or being hurt from. We'd be better. And so, on that same note, black women are trying to rise to the occasion. We're saying no more. We will not be ignored. We will not be left to grieve. We're going to get our stuff. I mean, think about, I don't know what your family dynamic is, but think about, the grandmas, the moms, the aunties that have come before us who probably look at us now like, you're so brave for going after that thing or that
Their
degree.
wildest dreams.
That extra degree, that business. So many of the women that we come from were being beaten down, broken, and hurting, left ignored. And so many of us now are breaking generational curses. And I think society would benefit from helping us to do that, because we'll only help to fix the issues that are in front of us.
Absolutely.
We'll only be assets across the board. I mean, even looking at, we could talk about capitalism, but we won't. But even looking at corporations, bringing in these black women who are heading DEI and HR, I mean, they're killing it. We are assets everywhere, and we should be treated accordingly.
And we're not tokens. Because
Not
that's another thing I see a lot too. Is,
we're
I got the black
imaginative.
woman, I
Right.
have the...
Right, not just as a placeholder. It doesn't matter what space we go into, whether it's the classroom or the boardroom, we kill it. Let a black woman get full range and we'll take you to the moon every time.
Every time. Every time.
It was too good.
Too good. Okay, so my final question for you, sis. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy just for this entire conversation.
honored
And our
to be
audience,
here.
what they're going to get from this. For our audience, please give them some words of wisdom or some words of encouragement, something that you want them to take along with them, with the understanding that there's going to be so many different people that watch this and see this episode. So really just be mindful of just everybody. But if you choose to speak specifically to black women, I'm with you. But if you choose to speak to everyone, that's okay as well.
Probably both. I do both. I feel like to everybody, I think we'd all do well to remember that no problem is just someone else's problem.
That's so good.
We should all be invested in the crises that we see going rampant through our communities. And even just thinking about my hometown city, Chicago, Illinois, gun violence is not just tearing the South Side and the West Side apart, it's tearing all of us apart, because if you feel so uncomfortable that you can't walk around your whole city and claim it as your own, that is a deficit, and nobody should feel that way. Whether you're in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Seattle, investing in black communities means that we all get to move freely, because we shouldn't be afraid to go anywhere. We shouldn't be afraid to connect with anyone. So ending the poverty-induced gun violence is going to help all of us to heal and to come together and share space with one another. And then to black women, don't let nobody make you small, ever. Don't let anybody tell you what you're capable of. Whether your dream, your space for imagination is how you want to raise your children differently, or your space for imagination is the business that you want to create, go after it unapologetically, because you deserve it.
I could cry. My cup is so full.
Mine too. And I want to thank you, because we didn't get to tell the audience exactly what happened, but you saw my talk, and it was a big deal for me to even be here and do a talk like this. And you gave me my flowers, in front of everyone, afterwards, we all got to take a picture, all the Black women who were there present for it, which was so important for me.
Absolutely.
And invited me to have this conversation, not even knowing me now for 24 hours. And we got to connect, and you were just so forthcoming with where your heart posture was. I asked you that question specifically, what is your heart posture towards the work?
No one's ever asked me that. So when sis said, what is your heart posture? I want to know. That is so beautiful. I'll definitely be using that too.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to know because it was like so random. You were like, you want to do this podcast? I was like, huh? But I'm grateful that we got to do it and connect, and I'm excited to build with you and build sisterhood with you. And I hope you get all the investment that you can possibly get for your work, whether it's for your nonprofit, whether you decide to do something else with your real estate license. I pray that God gives you favor and blessings through every endeavor that you have for your children too, because you've already broke generational curses for your line, even if you don't know it yet. You're doing so much. And I pray that all of your efforts for the community be blessed.
You too, sis. Thank you so much. I just see so much for you. I see you being Oprah status.
I'm screaming. I won't knock it.
Come on.
I won't knock it. Ethical Oprah.
I do. I just can't wait to see you, just in the light. You're already shining, right? You're already in the light. But in terms of just the whole world knowing your name, it's coming.
I receive it.
I'm
not running from it no more.
I'm not running from it no more. I think that's where I am right now. And that's why this is such a great conversation and it's so aligned, because I'm not running from it anymore. Like you said, don't let nobody dim your light. Don't let nobody, tell you that you're not who you are. We are powerful beyond measure. And so I'm just excited for what the future holds for us as Black women and for us as individuals. Absolutely.
Aw.
Thank you, sis. This is good.
This was good.
So thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. If you can go ahead and tell the audience how to get in touch with you, give them your social media handles, website, email, anything that you want them to have in order to connect with you.
For sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So you can connect with me at Instagram. I am YAGIRL Eva. I'm your girl Eva. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter is all the same thing for me. LinkedIn, Eva Maria Lewis. And my organization is Free Roots Operation. Our Instagram is at Free Roots Operation. That's where we're up and popping. We're also on LinkedIn too. Go to our website, www.freerootoperation.com. You can get in touch with us. We are always open for so many different types of support, even if you don't know what you can offer, but you just want to do something. We will help you figure it out.
Thank you so much.